The diplomatic vessel, Stellar Swan, drifted silently through Aralis 9's upper atmosphere, like a bored swan at an interplanetary tea party. If that swan were powered by antimatter and held together with budget cuts and stubborn engineering. Inside, the temperature was always 3 degrees too cold for comfort and 5 degrees too warm for logic. And Lieutenant Arden Vale had, for the 7th time that morning, managed to jam his stylus into the vent out of sheer frustration. "Communications update?" barked Captain Morrell through the comm. "Still communicating," Arden replied, not looking up from his snack ration, which had fused itself to the packaging in defiance of physics and hunger. "With myself, about the existential horrors of being stuck in orbit for 3 weeks without decent coffee. Try harder." That was a phrase Arden Vale heard often, second only to, "You weren't supposed to say that out loud," and "Get off the console." He sighed and spun his chair to face the translation interface, a shimmering cube of filtered Aurelian speech patterns running endless algorithmic loops. The cube beeped. Arden beeped back. Then the door hissed open. She stepped into the chamber like she owned the air. Tall, composed, wrapped in a living shawl that shimmered between nebula blue and meteorite gray, Elena of Aralis made the word alien feel embarrassingly reductive. Her skin glowed faintly, just at the collarbone and temples as if lit from within. Her ears, long, leaf-like, and moving ever so subtly, arched back like antennae tuned to a quieter frequency. Arden dropped his stylus, and his snack, and possibly his jaw. "You're the liaison?" she asked. "I am, unfortunately." He stood, managing to trip over his own foot and catch himself on the desk with the smooth grace of a malfunctioning droid. "Lieutenant Arden Vale, Earth Consortium Communications Division, fluent in 6 dialects, 2 codes, and 1 very awkward high school poetry phase." Elena blinked slowly. "I see. You speak for your people. Not all of them, just the ones with no sense of humor and extremely tight neckties." He grinned. She didn't. Not immediately. But something flickered at the corner of her mouth, the suggestion of a smile that hadn't been invented yet. They sat. Arden activated the neural translator. Elena declined. "I prefer natural speech," she said. "Your language is chewy." "Chewy?" "Dense, packed, like rations in a can. We speak in waves and rhythms. Your words are pebbles. Our thoughts are rivers. I once wrote a haiku about a sandwich. That probably explains the pebbles." Elena tilted her head. Her ears shifted. "You are not what I expected." "Likewise, I thought your people were 7-foot telepaths with tentacles." "You're thinking of the Quarnus." "Oh, right, my mistake. I keep a chart, but it's mostly cartoons." Silence lingered, not uncomfortable, just curious. Arden found himself watching the play of light on her face, the way her eyes moved like she was reading a second conversation beneath his words. Perhaps she was. "So," he said, "what's the first thing I should not say if I don't want to insult your entire civilization?" "Do not refer to our ears as cool, or wings, or space elvish." He cleared his throat. "Got it. My culturally sensitive filter just kicked in." "It's about time." They met daily after that. Briefings, summaries, exchanges. Words became easier. Humor crept in like starlight through cracked hull plating. Elena began to ask questions. Not diplomatic ones, but strange things. Why do humans laugh when they're nervous? Why does coffee smell like despair? Why do your leaders yell even when they agree? Arden answered honestly, often with sarcasm, occasionally with diagrams. One evening, just as they were closing out another round of fruitless peace prep, Elena glanced at him and said, "Your thoughts are louder than your voice." He swallowed. "Is that a compliment or a security breach?" She didn't answer, just turned to the viewport where Aralis spun below them, fractured and luminous, like a pearl cracked in half but still glowing from within. And for the first time, Arden felt that something beneath the formalities had shifted, quietly, invisibly, like a comet changing course 1,000 light years before impact. The conference chamber smelled faintly of ozone, artificial citrus, and impending failure. Rows of delegates, human, Euralian, and one suspiciously gelatinous being, with a translator pinned to its slime, sat in polite interstellar silence as the High Council attempted diplomacy for the 12th consecutive hour. Arden Vale, flanked by a translator drone and a cup of rehydrated coffee he'd started to genuinely fear, slumped low in his seat and stared at the far wall like it might reveal a secret passage to a dimension where negotiations didn't involve bureaucrats quoting subclauses. Elena sat 2 seats down, poised as ever, hands folded, ears at full alert. She looked like Serenity incarnate, if Serenity had cheekbones that could cut glass and a gaze that could pierce titanium. Arden was not doing as well. His shirt collar had developed a rebellion, his right boot had fused itself to the deck with spilled stim gel, and someone had mistakenly served him a bowl of Aurelian ceremonial nutrient paste, which was apparently sacred, inedible, and mildly sentient. He poked at it. It blinked. "Don't feed it emotions," Elena murmured. "Too late. I think it absorbed my will to live." She allowed herself the ghost of a smile. A delegate from Europa 5 was currently yelling about trade tariffs, oblivious to the way the room's oxygen levels were dipping, thanks to an overtaxed filtration node. Arden's job was to translate nuance. Today, nuance meant stop yelling before someone passes out. He leaned over. "Any idea what she's actually mad about?" "She believes the tariffs are a cover for military expansion." "Right, so standard operating paranoia." Elena nodded. "She is not wrong." "Oh, cool. Glad I wore my non-explosive vest today." Then came the pause. The kind that slithers across a room just before someone says something that makes every official present groan in 5 languages. The High Council chair, a woman whose eyebrows had been surgically enhanced to twitch more expressively, cleared her throat. "We propose an extension of Earth's atmospheric processing rights on the southern continent." Elena's composure shifted, almost imperceptibly. Her ears flattened just a touch. Her skin's luminescence dulled by one shade. Arden knew a diplomatic landmine when he saw one. He stood. "Counter-proposal," he said, voice cracking slightly. "We instead don't do that." The room turned. Elena blinked. The chairwoman's eyebrows arched toward the ceiling tiles. Arden cleared his throat. "I mean, respectfully, we've been here 12 hours. I'm pretty sure I bonded emotionally with my nutrient paste. Maybe now's not the best time to suggest we dig deeper into a planet that's already politely screaming at us to stop." Someone snorted. From the gelatinous delegate, possibly accidental. The tension cracked just enough for Elena to rise beside him. "I believe what my colleague means," she said, her voice carrying like wind through chimes, "is that continued resource extraction without reciprocal ecological repair is not only illogical, it's rude." There was a beat of silence, then murmurs, shuffling. The chairwoman stared at them both like they'd grown additional limbs. Elena remained calm. Arden leaned against the table like he was trying to merge with it. They were dismissed early. Back in the corridor, Arden pulled off his translator badge and exhaled. "Well," he said, "that went as well as expected, which is to say, horrifying, slightly hilarious, and full of political landmines wrapped in biodegradable paper." Elena walked beside him, arms clasped behind her. "You stood up for my world. I stood up for logic, and also because sitting any longer was making my lower spine question its life choices." She looked at him then, sideways, the way one might regard an odd constellation. Familiar, but just out of pattern. "You speak in spirals." "Only when I care too much." They reached the viewport again. Oralis below, spinning slow and solemn. "Did you mean it?" she asked. "Mean what?" "That we should stop." Arden hesitated. "I meant that if you love something, you don't tear it apart for spare parts. You try to understand it, maybe even protect it." She was silent for a long moment. Then quietly, "You don't talk like most humans." He looked at her. "That's because I listen like a broken radio. Sometimes things come in scrambled, but the signals still get through." Elena's lips curved. "Perhaps that's why I keep hearing you, even when you don't speak." He smiled, surprised by how much he wanted to stay in that moment, suspended in orbit between one world and the next. The descent module shuddered like a sleep-deprived badger with trust issues, rattling Arden's bones in a rhythm suspiciously close to jazz. He was fairly certain the Aurelian shuttle had been designed by someone who thought safety was just a setting on an old toaster. Still, the seats were upholstered in something plush and faintly musical, and Elena had assured him the ship hadn't exploded in over 6 years, which was, by her standards, remarkably reliable. "You're gripping the console," she noted. "I'm hugging it," Arden said, voice high-pitched with the kind of calm only found in emergency protocols and theme park rides gone wrong. "For emotional support. You've survived worse. Name one thing. Your last attempt at Aurelian syntax. You conjugated peace into fermented cow spleen. In my defense, your language has 17 tones, and 3 of them are emotional sighs." She turned to him, ear fins flicking slightly with amusement. "This biome is sacred. Few off-worlders have seen it. Is that why the landing gear sounds like it's weeping?" He felt the gravitational tug shift as they broke through the final layers of Euralian atmosphere. Below them, a verdant expanse unfolded. Luminescent forests that swayed without wind, rivers glowing faint blue beneath bioluminescent fog, and jagged spires of stone pulsing with embedded crystal veins. Arden pressed his face to the viewport like an overexcited child. "That tree just waved at us. It's responding to the heat signature of the engine. Waving is a rough translation." "Oh no, I think I just fell in love with a forest." Elena smirked. "You do have a type." The module touched down with a metallic sigh, and the hatch hissed open to a rush of fragrant, charged air. Arden stepped out and immediately inhaled something that made his nose tingle and his thoughts go slightly sideways. "Is that—" "Spore mist," Elena said. "Mildly hallucinogenic to humans. You may see some—" "Okay, the ground just winked at me." "Anomalies," she finished. "Try not to pet anything unless it pets you first." They walked beneath towering flora that shimmered like oil on water, each leaf moving independently in slow, curious gestures. Strange bird-like creatures chirped above, their calls sounding disturbingly like sarcastic applause. Elena moved with confidence, clearly at home, while Arden stumbled through vines that whispered apologies every time he tripped. "You're not just sightseeing," he said, half out of breath. "This place, what is it really?" She paused at the edge of a crystal pool, the water still and glowing with a soft pink radiance. "This is the temple biome, a living archive. Every species here was chosen, seeded, protected. It is memory, in biological form." Arden blinked. "So, a museum, but with more tentacles. A sanctuary, our past, present, and possibly our future, if we survive ourselves." They stepped inside a cavern carved by time and resonance, the walls etched with pulsing glyphs. As Elena placed her palm against a stone, it shimmered to life, projecting a holographic tableau. Scenes unfolded, towering cities grown from trees, starships made of bone and crystal, and finally war. Fire from the sky, Earth Consortium vessels, extraction drills. "I was raised here," she said quietly, "trained not to hate." Arden stood beside her, watching the destruction rendered in spectral light. "We were told this place was uninhabitable, that you'd left." "We made you believe that," she said, "to keep this place safe." He looked at her. "Then why bring me?" She turned, and for a heartbeat, the ancient glow caught the edges of her eyes, reflecting something between sorrow and hope. "Because you ask questions," she said, "and because you're the first one who laughed when the nutrient paste blinked." Arden grinned. "Well, it was adorable, in a gelatinous nightmare kind of way." They sat on a stone that hummed beneath them, sharing silence and stories. Arden tried not to lean too close, but failed. Elena pretended not to notice, but didn't move away. Somewhere nearby, a tree chuckled. Arden chose to ignore it. The temple breathed. Arden hadn't noticed it at first, distracted as he was by the musical stones and the vine that had tried to braid his hair. But now, sitting cross-legged on a platform woven from living roots, he felt it, the rhythmic rise and fall of the structure itself, like a sleeping giant exhaling dreams, or a very polite stomach grumbling in ancient Aurelian. I'm not saying the floor is alive, he whispered, glancing at Alina. But if it tries to cuddle me, I'm not emotionally prepared. It is alive, she said simply, eyes fixed on the glyphs hovering midair. The temple's pulse is a resonance feedback loop. It's tuned to our memories, our choices. Neat, Arden said, inching away from a patch of moss that had started humming in his direction. Mine just tried to download my bad high school poetry. I think it's judging me. Elena's smile was small, but it warmed the entire chamber. They had been walking the temple's inner sanctum for hours. Each room bloomed with forgotten knowledge. Holograms projected from seed crystals, archival sounds embedded in pollen, even scent-based memory triggers. Arden had accidentally relived someone's coming-of-age ceremony and sneezed through all 12 emotional stages. But the deeper they went, the older the temple felt, and more alert. This was the Council of Three's chamber, Elena said, placing her fingers on an orb floating midair. It shimmered at her touch, revealing three silhouettes, Euralian elders with ears like hers, but draped in living mantles that moved with their breath. They were scientists, she said, but also guardians. They engineered ecosystems, coded morality into flora. The trees here could out-argue your planet's Supreme Court. I believe that, Arden muttered, brushing past a fern that had just corrected his grammar. He was beginning to realize Aurelian science wasn't something separate from nature. It was nature, sculpted into meaning. Their machines grew. Their archives bloomed. Even the light in the chamber had a pulse, like the slow, thoughtful flicker of a firefly considering its thesis. Why show me this? He asked. I'm just a glorified translator with a caffeine addiction and a questionable relationship with office chairs. Because, she said, you're listening. Then the air shifted. A low hum began, not the musical kind from before, but a warning. The walls dimmed. Elena tensed, ears angled like antennae catching interference. Stay close. Arden didn't argue. Not even a joke. That alone was a red flag. The temple shuddered. A projection flared to life in the center of the room, but it was corrupted. Red, glitching, jagged. A human face flickered into view. Not a diplomat, a general. Operation Deep Shear confirmed. Extraction timeline accelerated. Neutralize resistance. Arden felt his stomach sink into his boots. That's Earth's tactical command seal from 20 years ago. Elena's face was unreadable, but her glow dimmed. We offered a treaty, she said softly. They sent drills. The projection vanished, leaving only silence and the whisper of nervous vines. So what now? Arden asked. We go back? Tell them we found proof that Earth violated its own agreements? Elena stood still, expression carved in stone. Number now, we disappear. He blinked. I'm sorry? Disappear? Is that a diplomatic term I missed? No. She took his hand, fingers cool and firm. They'll come for us, to erase this. You must vanish with me. Wow. I mean, normally I get dinner before I'm asked to go on the run with a glowing alien diplomat. She didn't smile. I'm serious, he said. I'll come with you, but you're going to have to let me make at least one sarcastic comment per life-threatening situation. That's already your default setting. Then we're compatible. Outside, the forest shifted, and somewhere deep in the canopy, the trees began to whisper a warning. They ran, not in the sprinting, cinematic way Arden always imagined heroes did, but in the awkward, root-tripping, gasping for air between jokes way that felt very real and very uncomfortable. Elena moved ahead with a grace born of familiarity, navigating the glowing underbrush, like it was coded into her DNA. Arden, by contrast, was collecting burrs in odd places and being mocked by bioluminescent ferns that recoiled every time he touched them. Do they have to hiss at me? He panted. They're warning others that you're ungraceful. Thank you, jungle. Very constructive feedback. Behind them, the temple's alert sirens, low-frequency pulses that made the chest vibrate and the stomach think about rebellion, chased through the forest in waves. The Earth Consortium's security override had been activated. That meant someone up there, someone with enough clearance and very little imagination, had noticed they'd gone off script, and probably off grid. They reached a clearing where the trees bent inward to form a dome, shielding them from aerial scans. Elena pressed her palm to a stone embedded in the soil, and the ground rumbled faintly. A hidden hatch spiraled open, revealing a stairwell that descended into flickering violet darkness. "Let me guess," Arden said. "Secret tunnel?" "Escape route," Elena replied. "Also functions as a cold storage unit for ceremonial pickled fungi." "I miss elevators." Inside the tunnel was cooler, lined with smooth root structures that softly glowed, pulsing in time with something deep and steady. Arden caught his breath, leaning against a curved wall that seemed to lean back. "We're not just running," he said, trying to match her pace mentally, if not physically. "You've got a plan." Elena nodded. "A data vault, hidden in the tectonic shelf under the western spine. Old tech. Pre-contact. It survived because it forgot how to connect to the grid. So it's like a great aunt who never upgraded her neural interface." "Exactly." They followed the passage deeper. Arden watched the walls. Strange glyphs appeared as they passed, reacting to their movement. Each symbol faded after a few seconds, but they burned in his memory, like memories trying to teach him something in a language he hadn't yet learned. Eventually, they emerged into a chamber that looked like it had been grown rather than built. A vast neural core pulsed at the center, suspended in air, its biocircuitry winding up into the stone ceiling like the tendrils of a dreaming god. Elena approached it carefully. "This is where the Council stored its truths and its betrayals." Arden stepped closer. The air hummed with static. "Okay, but is this one of those insert data crystal and ancient ghosts awaken situations?" "Only if the crystal is defective." She reached into a pouch and produced a shard, iridescent, jagged, and warm. Arden recognized it from the temple's altar. She slotted it into a recess at the base of the core. The chamber lit up. Holographic projections filled the space. Battle footage, evacuation protocols, intercepted transmissions, even environmental decay metrics. Decades of data meticulously recorded by the Euralian resistance. At the heart of it all, one message. Earth had broken the treaty and hidden it. Arden stared at the swirling truth. "We could broadcast this, leak it. This could end the conflict." Elena shook her head. "Not yet. They'll trace the signal. Find this place. They'll erase it again." "Then what do we do?" She turned to him. Her expression was solemn, but her fingers found his. "We become ghosts, whisper truth until it roars." Arden looked down at their linked hands. His heartbeat synced strangely with the core's pulse. "Ghosts with excellent hair and mediocre stamina?" "If necessary." Then the chamber trembled. A ripple moved through the ground, deep, mechanical. Something was tunneling. "They've found us." Arden tightened his grip. "Okay, new plan. We escape dramatically, sabotage a few systems, and then find some place to hide where your planet won't mock my running." Elena's ears tilted. "That narrows it down to the ocean?" "Perfect. I always wanted to meet sarcastic dolphins." The vault doors sealed behind them, and the truth waited, humming beneath their heels. The subcrustal tunnels beneath Oralis were not meant for humans. Arden was reminded of this every time he banged his head on a low-hanging root or nearly lost his balance on a slick patch of glowing fungal bloom that apologized after nearly killing him. "Next time," he muttered, ducking to avoid a cluster of bioluminescent moss that radiated what he could only describe as passive-aggressive warmth, "we take the route with signage and snack kiosks." Elena, unbothered and unscathed, moved ahead with the confidence of someone who knew the labyrinth, not just by memory, but by instinct. Her ears twitched at subtle changes in vibration. Her fingertips brushed moss-coated walls that lit up in her presence, whispering directions only she could hear. Arden, meanwhile, was followed by a small swarm of glowbugs who appeared to have mistaken him for a wandering buffet. "They like your scent," Elena offered. "They licked my boot." "Affectionate species. Consider it a compliment." "I feel so loved." The tunnel widened into a cavern, vast and domed, its ceiling veined with luminous strands that pulsed like starlight trapped in ice. In the center stood a platform, a biological transmitter, grown from crystal and vine, humming faintly. It had once served as a neural link for planetary communication, back when Oralis had united systems, not memories of them. This is it, Alina said. We can't broadcast the full archive, but we can trigger the WhisperNet. The what now? Residual code left in the neural lattice of certain planetary comms. It echoes, faintly, like old ghost songs in static. The right message, simple, fragmented, can reach places even Earth's filters won't detect. Like a rumor told by light. She smiled. Exactly. They approached the interface. Alina placed her palm against the control root. A soft tone thrummed upward, and tendrils unraveled, curling toward Arden's head like curious fingers. Okay, he said, not to question your ancient alien tech, but are these vines trying to read my thoughts? They only take what you give, like a very polite mind thief. That's comforting. He closed his eyes, focused. Sent the message he and Alina had prepared. Treaty broken, truth buried, echoes remain. We are still here. It was only 17 words, but in Aurelian code, those words carried shape, tone, and scent. Impressions more than language. The signal went out, not in a straight beam, but in waves. It would bounce between sleeping data satellites, forgotten cargo drones, maybe even a few bored shipboard AIs with nothing better to do. And then the cavern rumbled. Arden opened his eyes. Was that a good rumble? Alina was already moving. That was the rumble of someone very large and heavily armed noticing we've turned the lights on. They ran again, but this time, the tunnel behind them bloomed with red light. Mech drones, likely consortium issue, buzzed through the caverns, their forms angular and aggressive, scanning with beams that burned holes in the walls. The forest above must have been breached. Arden pulled a small, round device from his pocket. I call this a contingency button. What does it do? Something I'll regret. He threw it. The device hit the ground, blinked twice, and exploded, not with fire, but with a sonic pulse that sent out a wave of confusion. The drones staggered, their sensors scrambled. One started reciting poetry. Another short-circuited and fell in love with a nearby vine. That buys us 60 seconds, Arden said, coughing. You built that? Number 5 borrowed it from a very illegal raccoon alien named Skeev. I see. They reached a hidden shaft, covered by a membrane that parted at Alina's touch. It was slick, narrow, and tilted at a frankly insulting angle. You first, Alina said. You say that like I have dignity left. He slid down the shaft with the grace of a sock in a laundry chute. Alina followed silently like she was made of shadows and starlight. They tumbled into a chamber with a single rusting escape pod, the kind built for emergencies and never meant to be stylish. Arden slapped the side. You think this still flies? It only has to fall in the right direction. They climbed in. The hatch hissed. The controls flickered. The launch system growled as though deeply offended. Where are we going? He asked. Alina didn't answer right away, just looked at him, eyes reflecting distant constellations. Somewhere forgotten, where ghosts become real. The pod launched, shaking them into the dark, and behind them the message whispered through space. The escape pod drifted in the shadow between stars, small and unspectacular, like a seed flung from a dying tree. Inside it hummed with recycled air, low-power life support, and the gentle disapproval of a navigation system older than Arden's sense of professional boundaries. They'd landed, if one could call it that, on a derelict orbital platform once used for meteorological surveillance, now abandoned and listing lazily in orbit above a dead moon. Most of its systems were offline. The walls sweated rust. Gravity was patchy, but it had a comm port, food storage, and a cot made of dubious fabric that smelled faintly of hope and mold. Arden had never felt more at home. You've learned to fix things, Alina said, watching him with quiet amusement as he hot-wired a solar coupler using 2 forks, a melted ID badge, and what he hoped wasn't part of the toilet. Well, I've learned to attempt fixing things, he said. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm still losing arguments with the kettle. You talk to the kettle? It insults me first. She laughed, soft and surprised, the sound carrying like a warm signal through the quiet. 3 weeks had passed since they'd gone dark. The WhisperNet message was still echoing, fragment by fragment, bouncing from relay drone to forgotten satellite. They monitored its reach in short bursts, never too long, never in the same direction twice. It was working. The truth had seeded itself. Protests broke out on Earth. Reports surfaced. Whistleblowers emerged. Nothing explosive, yet, but the cracks had begun. Enough to disrupt the consortium's illusion of control. Enough for change to begin, quietly, like roots splitting concrete. Arden spent his days tuning receivers, building broken things into worse things that at least beeped, and trying not to fall asleep every time Alana recited the 12 philosophies of biolinguistic governance. She'd only made it to the fourth. He suspected she was sparing him. "You've changed," she said one evening, watching him carefully solder a power node with a level of concentration usually reserved for landmine deactivation or soufflés. "I still trip over my own boots, but you don't apologize for them anymore." He paused, looked at her. Her glow was soft tonight. Her ears relaxed. She looked less like a diplomat and more like someone deciding to stay. "You changed me," he said, and the words came out smaller than he expected. Elena didn't answer right away. She walked to the viewport where stars spun slowly in silence. "When I first met you, I thought humans were loud and blind. Some of us are. The rest just pretend we aren't. But you listen strangely. You hear things between things. Are you saying I'm emotionally tone deaf in a useful way?" "I'm saying," she turned, "that I heard your words in the temple." Arden blinked. "What words?" "You whispered them. You didn't think I heard." He felt a flush creep up his neck. "I did hear," she said, "and I waited to see if you'd mean them. And I'd be honored to be yours." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You waited 3 weeks to say that? You were busy arguing with the kettle." He laughed, a soft, startled sound, then crossed the short distance between them. Outside, the dead moon rotated, silent and silver. Inside, they stood together in the uncertain light of patched systems and old dreams. Nothing was fixed, nothing was certain, but truth had been spoken and heard. Elena reached for his hand. Arden took it, steady this time. Somewhere out in the dark, the whisper net echoed on, quiet, persistent, like two people learning to speak the same language, not with translators or treaties, but with trust. They had been ghosts. Now they were something more. And across a dozen systems, ears began to listen.